Hi, Amy. I can't hear you. I think you're muted. This is Tejal. I wasn't sure if there was a meeting today. I was checking the emails, wondering. Anyway, so I just logged in a couple of
Yes,
minutes to see if I could see you.
thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry, our promotional support with Chief Human Resources Office discontinued their support, and we're having a difficult time getting emails to 1,200 individuals on the PMUG list. So,
Oh,
still working on the logistics for that. Thanks for sticking with us.
nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. And welcome, Jessica.
Hi, Amy.
Hey.
Amy, I'm in a couple of groups that um, those issues persist with listservs. Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
statewide learning partner group, and some folks are not a part of the tenant. So when they're added as guests, they can't see the chat, and we share stuff in the chat. It's
Ah,
like we're always asking, can folks see this? And yeah, it's always
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very challenging. I'm about ready to reach out to our sponsor to get some more support on that. So, just wanted to add these links to the chat before I forget. Okay. Hi, Dale.
Hey, Amy.
Hi, Liz. Long time no see.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Okay, we are at time. I'll give one more minute for folks to join and then we'll get started. Hi, Amina.
Hi.
Just allowing one more minute. Okay, we are 1 minute over. We're going ahead and get started here. On behalf of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, hello and good afternoon. Welcome to our Project Management User Group presentation of the month. My name is Amy Croucher, Chair of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, and I will be facilitating our meeting today. We'd like to start with a few housekeeping items. As you may have noticed, this meeting is being recorded, so please mute your phone or PC if not speaking to help reduce any background noise. If you are not speaking, you are encouraged to remain off camera. A link to the meeting resources will be shared shortly after today's session and posted on the DAS YouTube channel and Oregon Project Management Advisory Board website. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your digital hand at the end of the presentation and Jessica will respond to them then. The Oregon Project Management Advisory Board has an opening for a board member position. For more information and to apply, use the link in the chat. Also, if you're interested in business analyst processes, the Business Analyst Networking Group meets in even-numbered months. For more information, visit the BANG website posted in the chat. The Agile Community of Practice is also an OPMAB initiative that meets every month or so. So for more information, their link is also in the chat. You're welcome to share with your colleagues and are encouraged to spread the word on PMUG's Wednesday sessions. I am pleased to host this session presented by Jessica Lorenz. Jessica Lorenz, EDD, is a change facilitator for the Department of Environmental Quality. Currently, she is the change manager for the agency's strategic plan and diversity, equity, and inclusion plan implementation project. And she also operationalizes employee engagement and workforce development initiatives. She has over 15 years of experience helping organizations and teams achieve success through frameworks rooted in neuroscience of change, adult learning theory, DEI, and trauma-informed care. Without further ado, please take it away, Jessica.
Okay, thank you, Amy, for the warm introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm just sharing my screen here, so it'll take a minute. Amy, can you see my PowerPoint? I always like to start there.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. And it's a pleasure to join everyone this Wednesday afternoon. And I also want to give a special warm thank you to my colleague Amina, who is in the room, for reaching out with this invitation to join you all today. So thank you, Amina. That invitation was special to me. And Amy, it was so nice to meet with you and talk with you last week. A wonderful new colleague in this space. So today, my plan is to talk about partnering for success with organizational change management. So really looking at how we can build a partnership between change management and project management to help sustain change and to help folks along in their change journeys. As Amy mentioned, in my role at the Department of Environmental Quality, also with the abbreviation DEQ, I have three main roles in terms of change management, also training, and then also some policy development work and implementation. So at the heart of my work, I'm always thinking about how to support folks through change. And so I'm happy to bring my learnings with you today, and I'm always in practice. So if I were to come back next year, there'd be some more information added. So it's something I always like to say is that I'm always in practice as a change practitioner. A little bit about me. I'm going to talk about my academic and my professional background, but then I'll also share who I am personally outside of work, what nourishes my soul, because I'm a whole being. So my background, I have a doctorate in education with an emphasis in organizational leadership and adult learning. So I think a lot about the neuroscience of change academically. Professionally, I work in change management and training, and that is supported by a foundation in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, as well as trauma-informed care work, acknowledging that we all come into change with past histories, and acknowledging that in each one of our change projects. And this work, who I am academically and professionally, is supported by my being in the natural world. So I have three images here, and as a commitment to accessibility in my presentation, I'll always give a voice to what's in the images. But I walk the world with two Bernese mountain dogs named Huxley and Elias, and there they are with my garden. I love gardening. Right now I have about 35, right out the door behind me, about 35 different varieties of dahlias and sunflowers, which are in peak season right now, so that's really nourishing my soul. But I spend a lot of time out in the natural world with these two. In the summers, I have an image there from last year. I was kayaking in Central Oregon. I love kayaking. I'm on the water quite a few weekends in the summer. I'm a fair weather kayaker though, so it's mainly a summer activity for me. In the winter, I have an image here from Mount Hood. I'm based here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm currently coming to you from my home in North Portland. But in the winter, I switch from my kayak to my cross-country skis, which the dogs also appreciate. And so I have a lot of experiences in the natural world. And as I mentioned, that really helps me be centered in my change work. So a little bit about who I am and how I'm coming to you today. So today's pathway here, I have an image of stones, and my goal here is to talk about my practice of change management and to really talk about the neuroscience of change. So why does change matter, right? Why do we have to think about it in projects? And to lead from that into how organizational change management, so how OCM can make a difference in projects, and a framework for integrating OCM and project management. So a framework that I'm working within my projects right now. And then some navigation tools for you to support individuals and teams through change. So I always like to provide presentations where folks can walk away with tools that you can use later on this afternoon, tomorrow, next week. So I always want folks to walk away with something tangible that they can use. So I'll give some theory and then move into some detailed tangibility, some practice pieces that you can move through your days and your projects with. So without further ado, let's think about this word change and what it means to us, because it's a pretty impactful term, right? When we think about change, change can be something as small as a new item that we're using, right? A new notepad that we're using, to something that's very, very large, such as a new process or a new piece of software. So when we think about change, I would like to highlight that change oftentimes is centered in conversations and outcomes. So it can be, as I mentioned, a new piece of software, it can be a new policy, it can be a new process that we're engaging with enterprise-wide. But how folks get from A to B is not just about the outcomes, but about the journey. And in that journey, I like to talk about change and transition. So transition as the psychological response to change. And this is a definition given to us by Dr. Britt Andreatta, who is a brain science thought leader. And so when I think about change in my practice, I'm not only thinking about the outcomes, I'm not only looking at that finish line, but I'm working my way back and thinking about how is it that folks are going to get there. So it's about not only the starting point and the ending point, but what's happening in that change journey. If we think about change in our own lives, both personally and professionally, what we're seeing in the past 20 years of change research, and certainly we're seeing this, in our change enterprise now, is that change is happening at a really rapid pace. And so when we talked about change 20 years ago of maybe having a longer runway, right, a project that maybe took a year or 2 years or 5 years, what we're starting to see within change work is that we're having more rapid change, and that those changes are building upon one another. So we have a change and then another change and another change. So we have some neuroscience here that really helps us to think about how we can best support folks with the large changes and then also small changes as well. So let's talk about what neuroscience offers to us with change. And so I'm going to bring in some brain science here, and then I'm going to talk about how it leads into organizational change management. So the story here that I'm going to start with change is in the middle of my screen. I have a brain, and it's showing a brain that's very, very connected. And this image and this work was adapted by Dr. Britt Andreatta, who has this amazing book called Wired to Resist: The Brain Science of Change. And so I'm giving homage here to Dr. Andreatta's work that I very much appreciated and adapted. And so you'll see this brain in the middle of the screen here, and then you're going to see, as I walk through this, there's going to be 4 text boxes that pop up that I will verbalize. But when we think about change, there's a lot that happens to us as we experience change, both physically and socially. So I'm going to be talking about our neurophysical response to change, and then how we can use organizational change management and project management to really help folks in that change journey as they move from point A to point B to point C to point D, and how far along the alphabet that we're going. So what happens to the brain when we experience change, right? When we experience change, it can be, and change here could be a physical change, it could be a social change. So when I use this word, it can be used interchangeably. And many parts of the brain are activated by change. But I'm going to talk about 4 of the main ones today. We have the amygdala, which is designed for us to really look at and detect the smallest amount of change. So when the amygdala senses change in our environment, it could be our physical environment, our social environment. When it senses a change, within 200 milliseconds, our bodies are flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. And I'll be honest with you, 200 milliseconds, I'm like, how long is that, right? It's just within a quick flash of a moment. So we have adrenaline and cortisol that's really running through our bodies. And with that, we have increased blood flow and muscles, and we also have increased lung capacity. So we have this increase in the physical body, but at the same time, our prefrontal cortex, which is designed to help activate our higher level thinking, it becomes less reactive. So we have a lot of activity in the body, but we have less reactivity in our higher order thinking. So what the amygdala is designed to do is really detect change. And then it's telling us, are we going to have a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response? And folks may wonder, what is the fawn response? I haven't heard that. It's a trauma-informed care term that it comes from when we're in a change situation and we go along with it, like we acquiesce, kind of a bandwagon of, okay, this is happening. I don't really know how to feel about it. I'm just going to go along with it. That's the amygdala talking to us. And so when this is happening, we have, a lot of activity, right? That change is saying warning. It could be a big warning sign. It could be a little warning sign if we think about the dashboard of a vehicle and all those warnings that come up, depending on the nature of the change. But we do have that immediate sense that something is happening here for us. When we enter new physical and social spaces, there's another part of the brain that becomes activated, which is called the entorhinal cortex. A big phrase for a Wednesday afternoon. I'm glad I nailed that. But when we enter new physical and social spaces, we have the entorhinal cortex, which is our internal GPS that helps us map our surroundings. That's impacted. It's telling us, help me find my way. So when things change, we need to build new mental maps, and this takes a bunch of time and energy. So for instance, if you've ever had the experience where you've moved locations, it could be a geographic location, moved apartments, you've moved your office, and it takes a while to kind of rethink about how's my route going to be to get there? Where am I going to put my stapler, right? And so that's a lot of activity for the brain because it's always trying to redo those mental maps for us. So we have this initial change, oh, it's being sensed, and then help me find my way. The third aspect that is activated in the brain with change is called the basal ganglia, which is responsible for turning behaviors into habits. So for instance, if say I'm trying to drink less coffee every day, right? I'm trying and I really, for the first few days, it's a really, really hard push for me, but maybe by day 10, I'm feeling more, more comfortable with 1 cup of coffee or 2 versus, 9 cups of coffee. And so when we think about the basal ganglia, as it's turning behaviors into habits, a lot of energy is expended. It goes into overdrive to build these new habits. And with that energy expenditure, it takes a lot from our brains and our bodies. So the more energy we have to spend, the more changes that will feel like there's fatigue. And in change management, this is oftentimes called change fatigue or change saturation. And oftentimes indicators of this are when we feel like, oh, I just can't handle one more thing, right? Or there's so many things that are happening. That's a physical experience in the body of the brain saying, I'm fatigued, right? I'm still learning and doing the last change. One more thing here is difficult for me. So change fatigue is very real, and it's something I encourage folks to talk about in change projects. The last area that I'm going to speak about is a fairly new to us in terms of recent brain imaging. Science has allowed us to see the habenula in the brain, which is responsible for decision making and action. And so when we make choices that lead to what I call reward, right? Kind of the things that make us feel good. That reward from the habenula releases to parts of the brain that release dopamine and serotonin, so those feel good chemicals. But what's interesting about this research is that it also shows if we make a choice that's perceived as associated with failure or punishment, the habenula actually restricts the flow of those chemicals cutting us off from our feel-good emotions. And what research also shows is that the more that we have negative experiences, that we become conditioned to expect failure, and that motivation, both internally and externally, becomes challenging. And so this is present in a lot of research. And for instance, folks have may heard of the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs scale. And so that the more that we have these negative experiences, it really can define our expectations of change in the future. And so we have a lot happening in our brains and in our bodies as we're experiencing change. And I like to tell this story because as I was putting together a presentation about this earlier in the year, I was telling a friend about it. And he said to me, I was going through all of these ways in which change manifests in the brain and the body. And he said, wow, this looks like change is really, really hard. Why would you want to be a change manager? And I said, oh, well, actually, I love this science because this helps me to be grounded in what happens to each individual as we move through change. Change happens on an individual level, right? Collective change is a result of individuals making changes. And so with this research, it actually tells us really good news. So I have a picture here of the Zen rock garden to celebrate the good news. And what this research really helps me to think about in my change practice is that resistance is a neurobiological response to change. And so actually, as a change manager and a change facilitator, I tend not to talk about resistance. I tend to talk about barriers to engagement because resistance is neurobiological. So in every change project, I'm not hoping there's not resistance. Resistance is going to be there because we're hardwired to resist change. And so with that knowledge, we can really help folks by understanding the nature of change and being prepared for the range of responses. So when I'm talking to teams about change, I oftentimes will start with the question, when change happens in your life, whether it's personally or professionally, what helps support you? And I oftentimes get a range of responses. It can be people, it can be processes, it can be training, it can be resources. But what that opens us is to think about, what do each of us need as we experience change? And you may have worked with teams in which folks' experience with change can really take on different forms within a project. So for instance, at the start of a project, folks may be really, really excited, or they may be feeling the opposite of excited. At the middle point of the project, they may have a different feeling. At the ending point, they may have a different feeling. And we can certainly, move back and forth between feelings, but really holding space in our change projects for the range of emotions and responses that folks are going to neurobiologically feel. Organizational change management can help us achieve project success because we have this information about change. And so our relationship with neuroscience and change holds for us a lot of information that we can build in to our change management practices. And so there's a little bit about the neuroscience of change, that resistance is the neurobiological response to it. And so always being prepared, that resistance is going to be present, and really helping folks navigate that resistance and navigate that transition and change is the heart of my work and what I enjoy the most about my professional collaborations. So how does this lead to organizational change management? Well, organizational change management focuses on helping folks in an organization ensure that people effectively engage, adopt, and sustain change. And so organizational change management, a big phrase, I'm going to refer to it from now as OCM, if that's okay with folks, but OCM is really focused on the people side of change. And so I have an image here from ProSci. I'm a ProSci certified change manager. There's many different certification programs, but the state of Oregon, we tend to use the pathway of ProSci. And this is their image, in which they're showing that at the heart of any change project, we have the reason for the change, right? The reason that we're engaging in conversations about change. And we have the movement from current state to transition state, right? Where change is being adopted, it's being talked about, it's in motion, and then to future state where we have that sustainable adoption. When we think about the opportunities within change projects, we have up at the top piece the project management side of this, the technical side of change. So the design, develop, and deliver of change. And here we have on the other side of this image, the people side of change, the engage, adopt, and use. And so we have through this framework a beautiful opportunity through project management and change management to think about how changes are designed, developed, and delivered, and at the same time, how folks who are experiencing the change are engaged with in the process, how they are adopting that change, what is the runway for the change adoption, and then the sustainment, the use, right? The sustainable outcomes. And so with organizational change management, we're always looking at where is the starting point, where are the milestones as we're moving along in the project, and how are we defining project success? And when we're thinking about project success, we have a pretty big value, a pretty big return on investment, the ROI for organizational change management. I also called ROI return on interest as well, right? So return on investment, return on interest into a change project. So for OCM, I'm going to highlight 5 values here that we have opportunities in the change management, project management practice and relationship. The first is that organizational change management really focuses on the processes and tools for managing change. So if folks are, I'm going to use an example from that I was working on last year. So I was the change manager for our iPhone adoption project. So that all of our, state iPhones that we're working on. So I was, in part of that project for the Department of Environmental Quality. And at the start of the project, I asked the question to our IT team of what do folks need to know? What's different from Androids what's going to be different from an Android, phone to an Apple iPhone, right? So we started with a conversation about what are folks going to need to pick up their phone on day one and to be successful, to log into Teams, to authenticate, to get into their Outlook, and to, take meetings from their phones. So really asking that question, what do folks need to really from day one really operationalize this change, and what do they need moving forward? So what they need at day one may not be what they need in month 3 when they needed to change their iPhone password. So looking at, okay, what do they need now? What are they going to need at the middle point of the project? And then what's going to sustain them using this technology moving forward? So change management is really focused on the processes and the tools, right? How do we equip folks? How do we help them pack their bags for the change journey? It also reduces engagement barriers. And this is what I was mentioning earlier, my switch in conversation from resistance. So this really reduces engagement barriers. It really helps when folks are feeling like, oh, this changes a lot. So it really gives folks a story along the way of here's where we're at with this change, and here's what you can expect. At the next milestone, this is what you can expect. So really looking at that finishing line and helping folks build a story and build a picture moving backwards of what the experience of the change is going to be like. 2 big parts of this are transparency for folks. So what is the experience going to be like? And then accountability, what is going to be expected of me along the way? And then also what's expected of me as a change facilitator, how am I going to help support that journey? Organizational change managers and organizational change management also help support project managers in enabling leadership through the change. So really helping to guide leadership, certainly project sponsors, to not only understand and embrace their role as a sponsor, but to really help build talking points and to help leadership committees or leadership team members really see themselves in the change, right? Because they're supporting their folks. And so it's important that leaders are seeing themselves in the change. And so I oftentimes will ask when I'm meeting with our leadership team, as I am now for our strategic plan and our diversity, equity, inclusion plan, asking the question, how do you see yourself in these plans? How do you see yourself in the change? It's a really, really wonderful question to start with. OCM also helps prepare employees with awareness and training. So in the wheelhouse of organizational change management are communication plans and training plans. Those are 2 really, really big pieces of change management, as well as with the sponsor plan and roadmap, but really helping folks turn those behaviors into habits. So looking at what resources and tools can we build, what relationships can we build along the way to help support folks. And then last but certainly not least, that sustaining outcomes. And so looking at what does true sustainment mean? So when a project ends, we want to really think about adoption, but then also moving forward, what is going to be the vision for that sustainable future? Because what we don't want is for a change to happen and then it's not tended to. I like to use that term as a garden. If it's not tended to, and then we, move back into the, the current state versus living in that future state that we're not making those changes, really reinforcing them and making them viable. So organizational change management can help in all 5 of these areas. And when you look at potential partnership frameworks for OCM and project management, there are a lot of different frameworks. So if you go into Google and type, how does OCM and project management work? There's millions of hits. So I'm going to offer one today that I'm working with currently, to see if there may be some ideas here that you might enjoy to hear about. So this is one that I'm currently in practice with and operationalizing for this PM and OCM partnership framework. So on my slide here, I have on my left-hand side of the screen, there is a Venn diagram. I have 2 circles, and these 2 circles represent project management and change management, and they have an intersection piece. So I'm going to talk about each of these individually and then talk about what I'm currently co-creating with the project manager for the strategic plan and DEI plan project that I'm working on. So when we look at the kind of the wheelhouses of project management and change management, we typically have for project management timelines, budget, scope, quality. There's a lot more there, but I'm talking about kind of the big picture. For change management, we have impact statements, assessing what we call organizational readiness, looking to barriers to engagement, and then training for folks. So we have both of these separate items that are in these 2 traditional frameworks, but I'm really, really interested in the intersection here and where can we co-create in each phase of the project. So with the project managers that I work with, as we start a change project, I really think about this. How can we build this partnership? What are some areas in which we can share some of the responsibilities? We can share some of the items, or we can share some of the deliverables that come out of a change project so that we're not in our individual silos, that we're working in unison with one another. So the project that I am currently involved in with the implementation of our agency's strategic plan and our agency's DEI plan is a big one, right? If you can think about those are 2 very, very big plans that are really important to our agency's organizational processes, practices, and our organizational culture. So the project manager that I'm working with currently, we sat down at the start of the project and thought, how do we want to be in relationship to each other in this project? And it was one of the most beautiful questions I'd started off in a project with. So I'm offering that today as a really great starting point, and maybe a not traditional starting point, but it's been really helpful to think about what's the nature of collaboration between project management and change management. So what we have committed to in this integrated model is to working together in each phase of the project on deliverables, so on items that are in the traditional wheelhouse of the project manager. So in terms of the project charter, it wasn't only the project manager and the sponsor who were listed. I also was listed, the change manager, and our DEI practitioner is also listed. So we listed out the full project team in the charter, and we also worked together to identify interested parties and also to identify risks. So we co-created the project charter together. So before it went to our project sponsor to review and to our wider leadership team, we had this co-creation. So from the beginning, at the base of our project materials or our project artifacts, we created those artifacts together. We're also working together to look at risk management from a change and a transition standpoint. So we're looking at current and future state. What is everything that's involved there? And we're also looking at the change adoption runway. So what is the desire for change? What is the time to build those behaviors into habits? So we're mapping that out together from our PM and our CM standpoints. we're working together to develop project updates. And our project updates are not only technical, they're also people-centered milestones. And so this is a big one for folks to see themselves in change. So when we're saying we're starting a project, we're not only saying, who's starting this project. So Jessica Lorenz as the change manager, but this is how we're committed to work. So we're expressing that to our agency so folks can really understand and see this is how this project is going to move forward. We also are deeply in consideration with one another on who are interested parties. So who are folks who are directly impacted by the change, and we're centering those folks in our project management and change management planning. And we're also thinking about not only their needs, but how can we best resource? How can we best support? So working together for a needs assessment as well as our resource allocation assessment. When we get to the end of the project, we're going to build lessons learned, and we'll hold lessons learned sessions, but we're not only going to think about outcomes, we're going to ask important questions about the process of getting there. So we're centering not only the change itself, but the process and the process of using this partnership model, and how does it look and feel to everyone involved in the change, and certainly how does it look and feel to our sponsor as well as our project team. So this is a model that I'm currently using. As I mentioned, I'm always in practice. This is a model that I'm enjoying working with and finding very grounding. And I was speaking earlier with the project manager who I've developed this with this morning, and I said, "How is this feeling to you?" And he said, "It's feeling really great because from the start of the project, there is a different level of collaboration than both of us have felt before." This is not the only model. Certainly, I've worked in change projects where there's been project management and change management. We've had our separate, there's been no Venn diagram of there's been no center point, and it's, we've had success there. But particularly for projects that are involving organizational cultural change, that level of collaboration from the beginning has been very supportive, and it's feeling and looking different for everybody who's involved in our project. So I wanted to offer this framework today for you to think about and to ponder. As I mentioned at the start of our discussion, that I wanted to really focus today on some change management navigation tools. And so I'm going to be spending, the slide's going to be up for the next few minutes. And so Amy, I just want to acknowledge I am time checking. So we're leaving time for questions, I promise. But I'd like to spend some time here just looking at these. I said at the beginning, I love when folks can leave with tools, because it's one thing to have change theory and to look at the neuroscience of change, and here's the framework. But Jessica, what are some tools that we can use maybe right now in a project that you all are supporting folks through with change? So these are change management tools, not only for change managers, but when I talk with teams about change, I say, here's some tools that you can use to help support one another. And so these are tools that I like to share and to talk about, and hopefully there's something that you might be inspired by today. So the first aspect when I'm coming into a change project is to center those most impacted by the change. And so when I'm working with our agency leadership, when I'm working with project managers, my number one question is what's changing and who is the change impacting? Who are the folks undergoing that change? And then once we have that, I go directly to those folks and I ask quite a few questions, saying, how does this change look and feel to you? What would best support you through this change? So I ask a lot of questions at the start of the change project to really understand, what do folks need? And acknowledging too that what folks may need at the start of the project and the middle of the project and then towards the end may look and feel different. So I have a continual commitment to check in with folks along the way. Now, depending on the project runway, for the iPhone project for our agency, it was about, I believe, 8 months. So that project runway was different than if, in 2 weeks, you're told, hey, there's this change project and it needs to be done by by December, right? And so I want to acknowledge that, the time and the nature of the journey does change depending on our deliverable due dates. But I'm always checking in with folks in each stage of the process to see how the change is going, what their experiences are, what do we need to realign, what do we need to readjust, what do we need to take out, what do we need to bring in. So centering those most impacted by the change. My next area here over to the right is that I map the route for folks, or the routes, acknowledging that different groups of folks may have different needs. So I'm always checking in with that, but mapping the route. And there's this acronym in change management. It's called WIFM, but it's what's in it for me. And I like to talk to folks about, how are you seeing yourself in this change? I ask that question both at a leadership level, and then for folks who are experiencing the change, really building the route, building the story of the change. Here's where we're going to start. Here's the things we're going to think about. Here are the tools that we're going to bring in and provide for you, and we can certainly adjust along the way. But I always talk about how are we moving through the change? Where are we starting from? What does that transition point, what it could potentially look and feel like? And then where is our ending point? So really building the story of the change, or multiple stories of the change. If we have, if multiple stories serves folks in a different way than one story. Speaking of stories, my next one over is transparent communication. And transparent communication to me, and how we're operationalizing it in our agency through our diversity, equity, inclusion plan and our strategic plan, is we're transparent about decision making. So who is making the decisions in the project, why those decisions are made, and if folks are not brought into the decision making process, the understanding of why. Ideally, folks are involved in decision making who are most impacted by change. And if that cannot happen, folks need to know the reason why. So transparent communication is centering around decision making. And so at every point of the project, this is earlier when I was mentioning both the technical and the people-centered milestones. If we have an achievement of the project has met this milestone, here's how we've gotten here, and here's the decisions that have been made, and these are the folks that have helped us along the way. So those celebrations and that storytelling in communication are really, really important. The next one at my second line here is to support well-being, and I have a photo of cozy tea here. My change projects are always centered in changes happening on an individual level. So with organizational change management, we really are thinking about, okay, what do we need as an organization, but really acknowledging that our organizations are built from each one of our perspectives. So enterprise-wide, we're part of a change collective. And so looking at, what do folks need to support their well-being? Do they have wellness needs? Do they have affinity group space needs? Do they have human resource needs? And so really thinking about, how can we support well-being from the moment a project starts? And how can we communicate that to folks? So as they're experiencing that neurobiological response to change, the wave of responses, that this is what they know they can expect from the project change team. My next one over is to prioritize relationships. As I mentioned, the project manager that I'm currently working with, we're really prioritizing a collaborative relationship, but prioritizing relationships with those who are most impacted by change. So having time as a change manager to talk with folks and to understand how they're experiencing change is really important. So asking questions, active listening, empathy is a really, really important part of change journeys. So building in that necessary time. And oftentimes that time for relationship and projects is can be taken away, right? We become consumed with project milestones. We consumed with what's the next thing, but to really slow down and take a look at who are we talking to here, and who are we not talking to, and why. So really centering ourselves in those relationships. And last but certainly not least, I have some picture with Lego here. I'm a huge Lego fan. But building in time to build habits, we need time to move from behaviors into habits. So if I'm introduced to a new piece of technology today, I need to know that I have time to experiment with that. I need time to have those great joys. I need time to have really frustrating moments. I need to not worry if I don't 100%, get this technology today, that I'm not worried about, oh no, about my job tomorrow, right? So we're building in a runway for folks to experiment, innovate, play with new structures and processes, so they have time to build a comfort level, that they're not in the space of worry or fatigue with change. And so ultimately, when we look at these navigation tools of centering those most impacted, of saying who needs to be here at the table, who is not here, right? Mapping the route for them. Where are we starting? Where's going to be our middle point? Where are we heading to? Committing to transparent communication. This is how decisions are going to be made, and that supports well-being. Transparency is caring. Once we have that transparency and we have that commitment to decision making, we're really thinking about how are we building relationships within this project, and how are we also building in time for those habits. So all of these are interrelated. They're all interconnected with one another, but a real key one here is that starting with the centering those most impacted. That's always an important starting point in any change project. I've seen these operationalized by project managers, change managers, communication managers, training and operation folks. So it really does take multiple relationships within multiple units within agencies to help. I've also seen these operationalized by individuals as well. So I offer these as change management navigation tools to both help individuals and teams, also work units as well. So there's something actionable for each step of the change process, and for one person, or for 50 people, or enterprise wide for 8,000 people or more here. And so with that, Amy, I'd like to move into the space of sharing questions or thoughts, and I'm going to stop presenting so folks can see me.
Absolutely. Please raise your hand or place any questions in the chat you may have. And I can start out. Jessica, how do you help yourself through the change? Or that's really, how does the practitioner take care of themselves when being so empathetic and active listening? That has to be really challenging.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for that question, because I realized I typically don't talk about that, and I need to start talking about that more, right? If we're all supporting folks who change. So Amy, thank you for encouraging my practice here. And yeah, I see Amina, the self-care, it's a great question. So thank you, I appreciate this, because I need to add that into my presentation for supporting folks. Amina, as you uplifted that self-care, when you're caring for others, and folks may have this in their personal lives as well, right? When we're caring for others, we have to care for ourselves first, right? Because we're holding so much space and energy and intention and awareness. So I have a few practices that I'll share on a personal level. So I hope that's okay with folks, but I have a few practices that I share. Professionally, I prioritize relationships. So when I'm working in a change project, I really prioritize getting to know the project manager that I'm working with. I really prioritize meeting with each one of our leadership team members and with our sponsors to really understand where they're coming from and their needs. And so I have conversations quite a bit about needs, which are not all the time comfortable. Right, when you're asking folks, what do you need? Because I have heard, before, well, I don't know what I need. And so what I do is I'll typically put a few things, well, this may come up. So when there's conflict, how do we repair that with one another? So I ask the hard questions, right? And so that's part of it, is that I'm having those conversations about when things are really joyful, that's awesome. When things become more, if things become conflictive, or we have, the journey takes a different shape and form, what do we do to repair? So I have early and open conversation about that. So on a professional level, really building that collaboration and building relationships. On a personal level, I am out in the natural world a lot. So in my role as a change manager and a trainer, I'm talking with folks a lot. Typically at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I need to go out and just center myself in my garden. I recently got a new bike, and so I've been enjoying really long bike rides. So I think a practice, like a meditative practice, where I provide myself the space to really think and feel thoughts and feelings. Because I'll be honest and vulnerable, there are some changes that happen that I'm like, oh, great, that's really wonderful. There are other changes where I'm like, oh, not today. And so I'm on my own change journey. But I walk myself through those same phases of the journey as well. I'm like, what's in it for me here, right? As I'm supporting others, what do I need? And I will, I have colleagues that I have really sacred relationships with, and I'll say, hey, today, can you help me in this way? So that vulnerability of I don't have to do it all, which is easier said than done, but I'm constantly in practice with that.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, Amy.
That's
Yeah.
that's awesome. As I like to say, teamwork makes the dream work, basically.
Yeah.
And then it looks like in the chat we have a question. Do you have any recommendations for assessment tools or evaluation processes for the various considerations you highlighted as crucial?
Yeah. Thank you, Amina, for reading out that chat message. I appreciate it. Viva, thank you for that question, because there are there are quite a few, and they manifest from training and communications, but there are quite a few, assessment tools that we can think about as we move along with milestones in our project. So one is that I like to think about in terms of the layers of adoption is that I will ask for folks, I do listening sessions along the way. So rather than listening sessions at the end of a project, I do lessons learned as we move along. Those can be conversations. So I could call Amina and say, hey, Amina, how is this going? Can you have any recommendations for me? I hope, Amina, it's okay if I bring you in as my colleague into this response. Yeah. So Amina and I might talk about how is this going? Or you can also do anonymous surveys. I do like to always offer anonymous feedback to help really take accountability of folks' confidentiality and their anonymity. So I provide a lot of different ways for folks to reach and get in contact with me. So surveys, I provide live listening sessions. Folks always know that if they would like to talk with me one-on-one, or they would like to talk with me in terms of partnership with other folks on the project team, that they can get a hold of me. So as we're moving through and moving along, I'm always asking, how is it going? What are the joys? And then what are the points that feel less joyful? What are the pain points? So yeah, that's a big one that I'll offer, is assessments along the way. The second piece there that I like to really think about is I do also ask our leadership team, what are you observing when we're looking at changes that impact teams? So I might ask Amina, hey, how is this feeling individually? And then is there anything taking shape for you as a team that I should know about? So checking in on the individual change as well as team change. And then for agency-wide projects, so really checking in with our leadership team to see, how are things changing for you? Are we seeing, visible change? What's happening there? So centering those folks, those are most impacted in conversation, also checking with our sponsors and our leadership, is there anything that you need as you're supporting this and your change championing as well?
Looks like Viva might be typing something else in the chat as well.
I love when you can see that. I love it.
Yeah. But I love the point that you made about checking in with all of the various different groups. It in addition to just sponsors or people who are directly involved in the project, just to make sure that the change that you're trying to manage is happening in the way that's intended, and that you're flagging things for people in leadership that can maybe resource solutions, for things maybe starting to go off track or needing to bring things back, or get the communication out there. And it looks like Viva put, do you have any recommendations for small sections, those with limited resources or teams of one?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, because I think enterprise-wide, we're always thinking about resource allocation. And more often than not, in the change projects that I've worked on, we have resource limitations. So I want to acknowledge that this is an area that I'm actively thinking about. And I mean resource limitations not only in terms of funding, but resource limitations in terms of folks and workload. Right? That, to have the question of, well, if this person has the desire to really help out, are there workload considerations? Because I don't want to overburden someone in workload. So for recommendations for small sections, work units or teams, or for folks who are working in change projects, right? They're the project manager and the change manager. That I think building in opportunities for listening along the way that are maybe rather than like personal, like one-on-one listening sessions, for holding group listening sessions. And here's where I also think surveying can be really helpful. So you can narrow down surveys. So let me give an example here. This is on the fly example. I'm sorry, Viva, if this is not a super, if it's not my best example. But say, for instance, I'm working on a project in which we're putting together a new policy and we're putting together training for that policy. And I'm wondering, is the training really adequate? Amina and I have talked about this. I'm looking back at days that we're building training around things. But really asking specific questions that I know I'm going to be able to integrate into the change project. So I don't want to ask questions that I'm not going to be able to act on. So I wouldn't ask a question in that sake of, what if I 100% can redo this training? I'm going to ask about specific sections of the training. So I may say, is this training providing a clear understanding of X, Y, and Z, right? And so then I'm offering very, very specific aspects that I know that I can change, or I know that I can impact, and really not asking questions or really not promising, which I know that, like, just because of resource allocations, that I'm not going to be able to deliver on. So Viva, that would be an example there of asking very, very specific questions that you're going to be able to account for in the change process. Oh, good. Thank you. I was like, oh, I hope that's an okay example Wednesday afternoon. Another example of this too, that I'm thinking about is helping to streamline communication, and Teams really helps us with this. So I've been experimenting with this more. So speaking of kind of communication, we talk a lot in our agency about the best ways to communicate, and some folks love email, some folks don't love email, some folks love Teams posts, some folks love video. So one of the things that I've been looking at are, what are some ways in which I can build communication and share it across multiple platforms? So in Microsoft Teams, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm building newsletters, and I can put them out to channels, but then I can also hit an email send, right? So that communication goes to two different places, but it's the same communication. So folks could look at it. And Amy, you could say like, oh, I love looking at it in the newsletter format on Microsoft Teams. And Amina, you could say, actually, I'm an email person. I would prefer to go back to that because it's in my email and I can search it. So I've been really, I've been experimenting with that, looking at, okay, this is, to help with time management. So we're looking at, here's one communication, but here are all the different forms and different ways that it can go out. I'm also moving away from, Viva, this one has really helped me. Also, Amy, this one goes to kind of the self-care, is that, early on in my change career, I thought every communication needs to be absolutely perfect. I would agonize over this. And what I found is that sometimes in projects, informal communication, there's also room for it. So for instance, giving project milestones in an agency-wide town hall, or in an all-manager meeting, or doing a 5-minute training video on, hey, I'd like to introduce this change is coming. And so folks can interact with that in the video, or they can see it, right? So if we're going to have a new process or a new policy, let's take a visual look at how this policy is laid out. And here are some sections to highlight. So I use video quite a lot in my work, and I know it seems like, oh well, does that take a long time? I said I've let go of that perfection where I say, if I say in a video 5 times, I'm not editing that out. I'm asking for vulnerability, and I'm being human, and I'm sharing that with folks. So Amina, don't make the perfect enemy of good. Yeah. Yeah.
I think those are great suggestions.
Yeah, it's easier said than done though, right? Like with that of not of not becoming overwhelmed by the perfect. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Any more questions for Jessica? Not seeing any at the moment. I can certainly move into closing if you're ready, Jessica.
Yeah, that sounds good. And
Okay.
if anything changes for folks, like, later on this evening or at the end of the week or next week, you have a question, you can always contact me. I'm always happy to talk with folks. So wanted to offer that as well.
Thank you so much. I think that'll be really helpful. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. And thank you so much to Jessica for presenting. I will post a link to a short survey in the chat and we will review those. One moment. Here we go. And then, so I've posted that survey in the chat that will help us improve future PMUG experiences and to nominate yourself or a colleague as a future speaker. You can also look for a follow-up email with links to resources. And please share with your team members and those who may not be on the PMUG listserv to reach out to myself, Amy Croucher, if they'd like to be added. Also, if you're interested in becoming an OPMAB member, visit the website posted earlier in the chat. If you're interested in learning more about the business analyst processes or agile community practice, please also visit those websites listed in the chat. I believe there was another reference. I believe it's the AI work group or website that was also posted in the chat. And please enjoy the rest of your week, and PMUG will convene again in November. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jessica. Bye.